Welcome to another podcast from V2 Strategy Advisors. I'm one of the founders, Matt Hullander, and I've got Chad Haney with us today. Chad's one of our founders at V2 Strategy Advisors, and Chad and I have both sold multiple home service businesses, and Chad specifically has also helped dozens of business owners that have sold to private equity or strategic buyers. And I want to talk to him today about the M&A world and maybe something that can help you if you're a business owner thinking about selling now or in the future. So let's start. Chad, tell us about your background. I know you've got a strong background in pest control. Tell us how it all started and how you got to where you are today.
I'm the owner of Lookout Pest Control. We've been in business for 42 years. Actually, my father started the company 42 years ago. I personally have been involved with the business for a little over 30 years now. And about 3 years ago, we were approached by private equity that was looking to back a platform company in the Southeast to grow. And we were interested in really expanding our brand. And so after talks and a few months down the road, we decided to partner with private equity. And it's been about 2.5 years now, and about 26 acquisitions later, and we've scaled into 6 different states.
Well, that's amazing. You mentioned platform, and I know we're going to talk about platforms and tuck-ins and bolt-ons and maybe some terms that some of our viewers or listeners out there are not familiar with, but since you're on platform, to discuss what that really means.
So a platform in the private equity world, you have platforms and tuck-ins. Platforms are companies that are either the initial company on the build out for a particular industry. So in our situation was pest control. Okay. And so they look at platforms as geographical areas that they look to build, and then tuck-ins are obviously smaller companies that they tuck into those platform businesses.
So Lookout was the platform business, and you partnered with private equity, and then they went around with your help and acquired other pest control companies that are now called Lookout. Do they always change their name or not?
Depends on the industry and how the actual private equity looks at expanding. In our situation, we felt that one brand, one way of doing business was the best strategy for growth in our business. Other industries I've been, a part of in the HVAC, roofing, a lot of them keep their own brand. Sometimes owners stay, sometimes owners exit. Sometimes there's equity opportunity. Sometimes, that owner is ready to exit and retire and walk away in 90 days to 180 days, after the acquisition takes place.
So really there are decisions from the seller. They get to participate. They may or may not want to be a platform, or they may sell to a strategic buyer. There's sometimes more than one option. Has that been your experience in helping a lot of these guys?
Yeah. For the most part, most people who are ready to exit their business doesn't necessarily want to stay in it. Mm-hmm. It's different when even though you're considered, if there's an equity opportunity as an owner still in that business, you're not making 100% of those decisions anymore. Sure. And for some business owners, that's hard. It's just a different scenario than most people are used to. But for the ones that are looking to just exit, we still like to have the opportunity for that transition. So we'll typically ask someone to stay on for 3 to 6 months, just to be available for questions. They don't necessarily have to come in and help run the business anymore, but be available so that if there's questions of about a certain customer or the way the actual business is ran in a certain aspect, that you're available to answer those kind of questions.
So I know you've helped your private equity partner buy more pest controls that are now Lookout Pest Controls around the Southeast, but you've also helped a lot of other industries, like you mentioned, HVAC and roofing, and I know you and I this week met with a landscaping company. What's the biggest mistake that you think owners may make, or just something they don't know about going into this?
Well, I guess some owners you know, you're kind of treading in a ground that you're not real familiar with. I was the same way initially when I started this. Obviously, in the last 3 years, I've learned a lot about private equity and acquisitions, which has helped me as I've brought new opportunities and even ventured out into other industries that, I haven't necessarily been involved in, but have helped them. It's really the same playbook all the way through. It's just a different multiple based on the type of industry that you're in.
Well, and that's why I'm excited for what we're doing together and helping those business owners because, I didn't have anybody to help me or hold my hand through the process. I had a CPA and I had an attorney, but there's so many things that a lot of these small business owners, and it's not to their fault, they don't know what EBITDA means or some of the terms, or when they're looking at legal language and they're talking about an escrow or a holdback or reps and warrants, and that's where we like to come in and help them. When you've done transactions for these other industries and it went really well, what made that a successful process?
Well, for the business owner, having systems in place in your business, some businesses still run their business on paper. Having processes and systems already in place definitely help, because when you go through a process with private equity or any kind of acquisition, there is a lot of data that is going to be requested. Going back from P&Ls to bank statements, customer lists, all the ways that you acquire a customer, your marketing, all of those things go into play on the valuation side of this. So, having those systems and processes in place ahead of time definitely speed up the process and help, make it a lot easier, through the transition.
I agree. And I know accurate financials are really important, but there's a lot of business owners out there and they run some expenses through their company, and that's okay. You get to add that back to your profit. Can you hit on that a little bit?
Yeah. So,
vehicles, and there's all kinds of, I had a lot of stuff I got to add back, fortunately, because the company that was acquiring me did not need those football tickets or my vehicle or those things I was spending money on. So yeah, that helps increase the value, right?
Absolutely. Because the way a buyer looks at that is, an owner's salary, which is typically going to be the biggest salary in the company. Most owners take the majority of, that expense is going to go back into that number, because most business owners are going to exit. And even if you did stay, you're not going to be making the same, salary that you were used to, because you're getting paid a lot of that money up front. And so those add backs, anything, vehicles, expenses like you were talking about, season football tickets, all those kind of things are expenses that they're not going to be incurring going forward. So that adds back into that EBITDA number.
You and I talk to a lot of business owners, and this happens frequently. They'll say, well, I don't think I'm ready yet. And it's kind of like, well, you never are until you start the process. So talk about how maybe they are closer to being ready than they think they are. And you need to at least start the process and go through it to know what your company's worth. And then you can make the decision, right?
Yeah. I always say, if it's on the radar, right now, home service businesses in particular, like your business and pest control, HVAC, roofing, is really on the top of the list in the PE world right now. Those go in cycles. So, 5 years from now, or 2 years from now for that matter, if that time is in that range, I would say look at it today, because the valuation you get today may not be the same in 5 years. What's really driving up the valuations today is the PE-backed companies that are there. Strategic buyers are typically sitting on the sidelines, waiting on a reasonable or good deal to buy.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And you see those cycles. For me, it was one-day bathrooms. That was a cycle, and really hot a couple of years ago. Car washes and self-storage, and everything runs in a cycle. So if somebody's just thinking about it, I think it's wise to at least consider that. Now, what are some mistakes that owners make if they try to sell their business without someone like us to help them?
Well, you have to think about it, that even a strategic buyer, in my world, in the pest control side of it, which would have been your Terminex and Orkin companies, those guys are seasoned buyers. They're looking for deals for people that are ready to exit, retire, and walk out. The PE-backed buyers, I mean, they do this every day, and they can really manipulate the number if you're not well versed on how these transactions work. So having a good advisor like us in particular that have been there and done that, and even though there may be a mistake that you and I have made or seen as we've progressed further down the road, we know how to help that potential seller on what mistake not to make or what to look out for, going forward.
Well, if there's a business owner out there that wants to start this process, talk about each step along the way and how long it takes and what, from them calling us till potentially selling the business.
Typically what happens is there's an NDA, non-disclosure agreement signed that basically states, nobody's going to discuss anything beyond what goes around this table. At the end of the day, maybe the transaction doesn't happen, and you don't want your customers or your employees to know that you're even thinking about selling, because maybe it doesn't happen today and it's later down the road. So we get that NDA so that everybody's comfortable, and then we'll start with a data request, and basically it's a list of your P&L, your bank statements, information about your business based on your industry over the past 3 years. Really, it's typically a look back over 3 years, so you can kind of project growth or loss, and be able to answer those questions of why this year was so good, but last year was maybe a down year, or hopefully you have continued to scale at a certain level, a certain percentage each year, and that obviously looks great.
Well, and they do take that into consideration, especially the trailing 12 months is important to a lot of them, I know.
Sure.
So after you request that data, what's the next step in the process?
So after that data is compiled, then basically you're really getting a free business valuation out of this at the end of the day, which, as you know, I've went through one that I've actually paid for.
Oh, they're 15 or 20 grand. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the worst thing that could come out of this is that you decide not to sell your business because the number's just not what you thought in your head that it was going to be, but you got a free business valuation out of it. I mean, at the end of the day, nobody wants to waste anyone's time here, but once all of that data is compiled, then we determine what, in today's market, what that business is going to range to a buyer.
Sure.
And we discuss that openly. And at that point, if the seller is in agreement to moving forward, we put it out on the market. We take it to the market,
Right.
out there in front of several different strategic buyers as well as PE-backed companies. And there could be 4 or 5 potential interests, or there could be one really good interest.
Sure.
And so we try to advise on, how to move forward from that point.
So, Chad, you've mentioned private equity a couple of times now, and I'm fairly familiar with private equity, and I'm an investor in private equity, and we both sold our business to private equity-backed companies. But a lot of these home service business owners don't know what private equity is, and that's okay. Let's explain it to them. What's the definition of private equity?
Basically, they build these funds, and they can be a few million to billions of dollars that they raise. Once those funds are raised and they have the capital to deploy, they already have strategic industries that they're willing to invest those funds in. And that's how private equity companies actually make their money, is once the money is deployed, it's basically a management fee.
Sure.
From that point. These investors that invest these funds are looking for a return in a short period of time. So typically a 5 to 7 year term, and at that point, they hope to 5 to 7 times their investment.
Yeah. And I think the average is 20 to 25% return versus where the stock market might get you 5, 6, 7%. And so that's why they're willing to wait. And you do have to wait on that 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So they do the roll up. Let's say it's a platform company and private equity invest in Lookout Pest Control, and you go around the Southeast and you buy a bunch of pest controls. At some point, this is hypothetical. You can tell me I'm wrong. You got now 100 Lookout Pest Controls. Explain what the recap means, and then I know some business owners have asked me, what does the second bite of the apple mean?
Yeah, so some call it a roll up, and basically you take all of those investments, all of those acquisitions, and then it's typically another private equity that comes in. And so they just keep expanding and it keeps rolling up. And next thing you know, it's a multi-billion-dollar. And some of these things actually go public, at some point. So that's really, in a nutshell, how it works.
Okay. Outside of private equity, let's talk about who a buyer could be and what a strategic buyer means if it's not a private equity deal.
Yeah, so a strategic buyer is typically someone that is in the same type of industry. So maybe in pest control, maybe that's a Orkin or a Terminex, your largest companies that actually have the funds to buy and acquire smaller businesses. Those would be a strategic buyer. The other buyers are, and this is typically on the smaller end companies. Maybe it's a father and son, that's out there that's maybe sold their business at some point in time and looking to get into something else, and or have some financial backing where they have access to funds. What's nice about private equity is they've already raised the money. There's no going to a bank and trying to borrow. They already have the money to deploy.
Okay, and then I know we sometimes hear the term bolt-on. That would be where you have a business and there's something related to that business that you can then add as an additional service or product offering, right?
That's correct. So bolt-on tuck-ins are, smaller businesses that kind of tuck in under the main platform company. But yeah, so for instance, maybe insulation and encapsulation companies.
Well, that would be a fair assessment. Yeah. And you do that at Lookout Pest Control. So you did pest control. Now there's another, I guess, vertical you can go sell, which is encapsulating or crawl space.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Yep.
Well, that's been helpful. Is there any other buyers out there that we haven't covered other than private equity, a strategic buyer, a bolt-on or a tuck-in, or a father and son? I think we covered it all, and part of what we help the business owner decide is which one's best for them. And we have questions we want to ask them and what their goals are. They may not want to sell to private equity. They may want to work another 5 years, and there's a lot of options out there.
Absolutely. And maybe it's not a full 100% acquisition. Maybe, you're just taking a few chips off the table and just lessen your stress life. Yeah. Maybe now you're a 50% owner versus 100% owner.
Sure.
So there's opportunities out there. It's not just a one size fits all situation.
Yeah, and there's so many things. A lot of home service business owners might think, why would they want me? But it takes a lot to open and run a place successfully. Not, you've got a website and advertising and social media and a business address, and you've got a business license, or maybe you need a contractor's license and a phone number, and plus, all the things you mentioned, like employees and relationships and vendors and customers and a reputation. So it's not as easy to just pop up shop. And I think that's why private equity sees it a little bit easier to come in and buy somebody. What about the business owner that's worried private equity is going to come in and change everything?
There will be changes.
Sure.
That's going to happen. I would be lying if I sit here and told you that there's not. But most of them have done this so many times and they've learned the mistakes. And it may be changes that you and I wouldn't have made. But at the end of the day, they do know how to scale a company and scale it fast. And that's really the goal. Is obviously they're paying a lot of money for what they're buying and they don't want to lose the business. So the last thing they want to do is really spend a lot of money and then lose what they've just bought.
Sure.
They want typically to retain the employees and the customers as well. So, it's one of those things that as an owner, when you've ran it a certain way, you kind of have to step back and realize that there will be some changes that, maybe you wouldn't have personally made, but at the end of the day, it's the right decision.
Yeah, and it's tough sometimes for business owners to accept that, and I can relate, but it is necessary, and they're successful for a reason, and they got their systems. So you've got strategic buyers, and you've got private equity. I know a lot of home service business owners that have children, and they're trying to figure out, how do I leave this to my kids? And I tell some of them, you just need to sell it and worry about giving the money to your kids, because some of these kids aren't ready for it yet. But do you run into that very often?
A lot. And that's a hard decision. But, sometimes those kids, I feel I had kids myself, and so I struggled with that. Would my son be interested in the pest control business? He's 12 right now. I don't know, right. 6-7 years down the road. And I didn't want, him to feel like he had to do it, just because there was a good opportunity and obviously on the financial side and maybe that took away from, what he really wanted to do in life. So yes, when it comes to family businesses, that's a hard decision. However, there are sometimes opportunities, where someone could stay on as, an executive of the company, obviously if they have the background and the experience to run that. So we've dealt with that on the pest control side as we've acquired other family owned businesses. But that does make a decision hard on selling, when you have, children in the business as well.
If there's a business owner out there that's interested, what do they do next? And I think, they worry about calling, but we're just having a conversation.
Yeah, conversation. Maybe the worst you get out of it's a free lunch. So, yeah. But we could, it doesn't cost anything for the consultation. I'd be glad to talk to you about your business, and even if it's not today, maybe it's a year or two down the road that you're ready for. We want to be that call that you make. At that time.
All right, last question. If you had one piece of advice for somebody that potentially wanted to sell their business, what would it be? Try
to run your business as it's sellable the next day. It would be my suggestion.
Well, and I've always said that, and it comes out of the book, The E-Myth. Whether you're going to sell it or not, or whether you're going to franchise it or not, act like you're going to, and that means you have to put those systems in place that it would work without you. And I think, for the folks out there that may not quite be ready yet, having a good number two is really important. Accurate financials. Do you have a good CRM? What are your systems? Can you measure everything? If you don't know the score of the game, you don't know if you're winning. So I would highly suggest, and we've met with folks that just try to operate their business off of QuickBooks only. And I think, depending on the industry, you might need a lot more information than that. So Chad, thanks for being on the podcast today. We'll come to you again real soon with more information about selling your home service business.